So today we're going to talk about all sorts of different things, and we'll get into systems-based thinking. We'll get into the superpower of having multiple different perspectives and approaching a problem, approaching any situation through perspectives. The idea that your thoughts are everything around you; they make up your experience of life. So we're going to go into all of those topics today. We'll also touch a bit upon what I think works well, systems that work well, and things that I've just been learning. So today will be more of a free-for-all today. And so if we just go into systems, why do systems work? The reason that systems work is that once we create a system and we stick to that system, things can change around us, right? Environments can change, people can change, managers can change, jobs can change, but the system you have in place, that doesn't change. And so the one thing that I've learned is you need to find a system that works for you. Find a system that works for you, right? Because people's identities and people's perspectives could be subject to change, but if you're grounded in your system, if you're grounded in sort of the systematic habits that you have, then it's very hard for others to not take you seriously. So what do I mean by systems? And systems have to be something that work for you, okay? It doesn't need to be some sort of grand system, or doesn't need to be a system that other people like. It has to work for you. It has to be suited for you. It's something you are confident in that will work well for you. So for example, one system, and this may be a weird system, and we'll get into the topic of weird, right? The topic of being weird is you always want to believe and stick with something that the common population doesn't. You always want to believe and stick with something that the common population doesn't, right? And if you can think of an idea or system or way of thinking that you know is right, and you're able to stick with it, right? That's different from the rest of the population, and you're able to stick with it. That's going to yield very good benefits. When you have a different approach, when you have some sort of different approach, and 99% of it is accomplished just by it being different, right? If you have this different approach and you're right about it, that's going to yield some great results. So let's get more into what the concrete nature of what this means and what this actually means practically. So in terms of systems, one system is so we, as humans, we like clarity, right? Clarity is the number one most important thing, right? Clarity. Having a clear vision, having a clear goal you want to attain. That's the number one most important thing. So clarity and a lot of times what we have in school is we have this clarity of grades, okay? We have this fixed goal of getting an A, right? Once you enter the workforce, there's no some sort of clarity or number that you're trying to, or KPI that you're trying to reach. Yeah, you may have some certain KPIs, but performance-wise, it's very hard to find that KPI. So you have to define your own KPIs, right? So what does that look like? I'll just give some examples. So I believe that the number of messages that you send per week is associated, not directly, but it has some association with your level of performance. And we can see that this is sort of related to, has some association with performance. So if you just think about, hey, the only goal is I just want to optimize the number of messages per week that I have, right? That's the only goal. I just want to optimize. I just want to maximize, right? Or it could be some other quantity, number of meetings, number of messages, number of tasks completed. Anything that resonates well with you and you think that you can stick with for a long period of time, that's sort of the metric that you want to have. So maximize number of messages. And the more weird it is, okay, in fact, actually the better, the more weird it is, because it's going to resonate with you. And the one thing is you have to stick with this for a long period of time, right? Systems work because if you stick with it for a long period of time, it will yield results. So maximizing the number of messages. Why is maximization of the number of messages important? Because this takes into account your level of engagement within the activity. So naturally, if you're engaged in the activity, if you're really involved in this, naturally you're just going to have more messages. You're going to be communicating with more people. You're going to be sending them tasks that you have completed, the number of words and you can think of this as a number of words, right, in messages, number of words that you're sending, that will automatically increase. The second thing that will increase is your tasks. The more tasks that you actually have, the more tasks that you have, the more engagement that you have in the activity. A, the more fun that you will have. And B, it allows you to sort of stick with this for a long period of time. So tasks, right, those can be measured through the number of words. Engagement through the number of words, right? You're going to have more meetings, you're going to talk about it more. So that's going to lead to a higher level in engagement. Right, if you have some questions, you're going to ask some questions. So you can measure sort of engagement by the number of messages, the number of words in the messages. Right, that's just one system. And that I felt was sort of working for me. And you just have to find that your own system that works for you. It could be number of emails, number of whatever, and you have to make it personable to you. So that's sort of number of messages, and then. You also have, and again, the main thing is that you stick with this for a long period of time. As long as you stick with something for a long period of time, right, it eventually will work out. So stick with something for a long period of time, it eventually will work out, right? That's the main thing, is you have to stick with this for a long period of time. Another fundamental idea is just have different perspectives, have different perspective and ways of thinking, right? And you can have so much fun doing this, right? So much fun doing this. The main thing is to have fun as well. Okay, and if you can if you can have some sort of list of values that you always live by, that is also a system. One of my other systems that I'll talk about here was sending a weekly documentation every week. And what I realized, why is this system, the system has to be rooted in some sort of logic, right? The system has to be rooted in some sort of logic. So the weekly documentation, why was the weekly documentation, I felt, was very effective? Because really, if you look at sort of the corporate world, and if you just look at just the nature of human work, what we care about most, actually, what drives is actually simply activity, right? Simply activity. Yeah, there are certain goals, but at the end of the day, the one thing that stays constant is activity. So as long as you show, so what I realize is as long as you show this activity, right, you will be in a good position, right? Because this is how all humans actually work. They want to show this activity. So that's the entire purpose. Is yeah, you can have these goals, you can have these projects, but the systematic structure of this is just documenting what you're doing. Activity, right? This ties into the root of human work. Right? You root of corporate 9-to-5 work, because if you're gonna work at something for that long a period every single day, it has to be rooted in activity. It literally cannot be rooted in any sense of accomplishment, actually. Right? Accomplishment, that's only through slow productivity, doing fewer things better, doing one thing at a time, right? Slow productivity, right? In the busyness of the corporate world, we like to think of it as busy, but it's really not. It's just poor time management. It's just us feeling like we have a ton of things to do, but you want to have a different perspective than the rest of the population, and you really want to stick with that perspective. So accomplishment is really slow productivity. You really want to, and then you also want to stick with with a different perspective than the rest of the population. And then again, maximize number of messages. Also, this idea of having just different perspective or ways of thinking, right? Have different perspectives and ways of thinking. So what does this actually mean? Perspectives and ways of thinking. This means that someone can say literally one statement or do one thing, and you can have literally an infinite number of opinions, or perspectives on that thing, right? On that thing. I can write A, B, C, D on a piece of paper, right? The reality is just A, B, C, D, E. Now there could be an infinite number of thoughts that people have as a reaction to me writing A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay? Right? This is just a simple example, but there are infinite number of opinions on a single event. So what you want to do is you want to find the perspective that works well for you, the perspective that you enjoy. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's say your manager takes something too seriously and you're thinking about how, you made a mistake or something, and you're thinking about what your perception might be, what the manager perception of you might be. Let's say the manager responds back with, how are you doing? Right? Now, there's so many different perspectives that you can take from that. Oh, am I in trouble? Oh, a casual perspective. That's one perspective. This perspective of nervousness, right? It could be in trouble. Perspective of sort of having fun and being detached. There's so many different perspectives you have just from this one question of how are you doing or what are you doing, right? And you wanna stick with, like, you can change perspectives too. You can change perspective, but you just want to make it in a way that allows you to have the most fun and that works for you. Have the most fun and works for you. So in this case, how are you doing? For me, I can think of this as in terms of like work related, like purely logical perspective. I can have like a lot of fun perspective. I can transfer this to the fun perspective. Similarly to, you can have literally different thought patterns on stuff. When an event happens, you can think of this event as the reason for the event happening. You can think of, the true nature behind this event. The true attitude of humans behind this event. Just the nature of how things work. Why this is happening. Sometimes a pattern or something that is happening. And let's talk about patterns. It is one thing to recognize other people's notion of behavior and patterns. It's another thing to recognize your own patterns and change upon who you are. So realizing patterns of other people is one thing, and that's how you can influence others as well. Realizing patterns of just how things are working, just in corporate world or in school, or how processes are working, that's one thing. But then once you understand your own patterns and your own how others perceive you and just your identity just objectively, then it allows you to have more growth because you're able to see what those patterns are, you're able to combat those patterns, and you're able to sort of transform into something that works well for you. Right? Another thing is sort of having this play mentality, having a different perspective, embracing boredom, lowering the number of comparisons, So what do I mean by comparisons, right? So I argue that our experience of life is just our experience of the comparisons in our mind that we've experienced. So what do I mean by these comparisons, right? If I give you an apple, right? The only way that the apple will actually ever quote taste good is through your comparison, your mental comparison to another fruit, to another thing, right? If this was the first thing that you've ever tasted, you don't have a comparison point or basis to go off of, right? So there's no good or bad. Good or bad happens within the mind, and good or bad is based upon comparison. So when we eliminate the number of comparisons in our mind, obviously we know comparison is the thief of joy. Eliminate also the comparisons in regards to, oh, this is better, this is not better. That's going to give us a lot more freedom in our happiness as well. So these are the sort of things that I'm sort of thinking about and just learning throughout my journey at doing school and all these different things that I'm doing. So that comparisons. And another thing is just embracing boredom. So and this sort of goes along with comparisons. Is that this is, and I was reading something about like dopamine. This is our background level of dopamine, right? Then as soon as we sort of engage in a dopamine-inducing activity for the very first time, then we experience like this high in dopamine, right? And so that feels good, right? That feels good. But then when you do it again and again and again and again, you're used to it. So now your baseline becomes like this. So now you need even more to get a higher sort of feel-good effect, right? You need even more, you need even more, you need even more. And so this is the issue, is that when we're sort of exposing ourselves to these, high dopamine-inducing activities, our baseline level of dopamine will increase. And so our ability to do more boring things will naturally decrease. So if we reduce our baseline level of dopamine, right, our comparisons will be fewer. Comparisons to like other things. So for example, if my baseline level of dopamine is here, right, I'm gonna find reading a lot more fun than if my baseline level of dopamine was here watching videos, right? Then reading is not going to be as much fun, because it's all relative, right? It's all relative to what our current experience of life is. It's all relative to the baseline level of dopamine, as I like to say. Another concept that I would like to sort of go into is this idea of Parkinson's law. So I guess another thing before this is patterns, right? Patterns of habit, right? Our human beings are creatures of habit. We're naturally creatures of habit. We have a tendency to do the same thing over and over again over an extended period of time. And we want to understand what those habits are useful and which ones we need to break. And we can do that by understanding the basic patterns of our habit, right? Think about what are the tendencies in our behavior. What are specific times we do something? Do we have a reaction after a certain moment? Can we break these patterns of habit? And we're able to break these patterns of habit by simply actually just having awareness of it. Having pure awareness that we're doing this thing. This is accepting that this is a habit and this is a pattern we are seeing, and sticking with that thought. Okay, sticking with that thought. So that's sort of where we get into this topic of motivation. Motivation is nothing but having a single thought in mind for an extended period of time. Having a single thought in mind for an extended period of time. And that's how we can actually break these patterns of thought. Because once you have a single thought for an extended period of time, that's how you're able to gain awareness. That's how you become more aware, more conscious of your habit. Because what's a habit? A habit is something you do unconsciously, without thinking, right? The more thought you actually have in your mind about that pattern, you're able to cultivate more awareness. Okay, and so we also want to get into the level of activity within the mind actually reduces your happiness, right? Because think about what our minds are doing. Think about what our minds are doing. Our minds are attaching thoughts to reality, and that's how we form judgments. Okay, if we realize that reality is just reality, we can't literally do a biopsy of an event and find good or bad in it, right? That's only created by our own judgments, by our own perceptions and beliefs that we sort of overlay upon that event, right? Which is why you can have the same event, but then thousands of other people have different opinions, different perspectives on it, right? That's why people have different beliefs. That's why people vote for different candidates. That's why people like different teams. That's why, human brains naturally are fundamentally different than one another, right? And then let's see what else we want to talk about. Another thing that I want to talk about is this entire idea of Parkinson's law. So Parkinson's law is this idea that work expands due to the time allotted for its completion, right? So imagine thinking you have a paper due in 1 day, okay? It turns out you're able to complete that paper because you only have 1 day to complete it. Now, if you give yourself 20 days to complete that same paper, it will take you 20 days to achieve that same task. It's because our mind is very good at adapting to tasks and adapting to time. So when we give ourselves 20 days to do something, our mind will naturally increase the complexity of the task, and it will adapt to the time that we have allotted for the completion of the activity. So it will naturally take us 20 days. Now, if we sort of give ourselves constraint and force ourselves that, hey, this deadline is actually in 1 day, and we actually believe it, then no matter what, we will still finish it in 1 day. Yes, it may not be of the highest quality, but we will still finish it in 1 day. our minds are human mind and body are very, very, very adaptive, right? A process of natural selection, we're very adaptive creatures. Just from an evolutionary standpoint, we are very adaptive creatures. So this is the root behind Parkinson's law, is that human minds and human beings are very, very, very adaptive. And we can use this to our advantage by setting sort of fake deadlines. But the only problem with setting fake deadlines is sort of really, really internalizing the fake. It's very hard for us to consider something real when we know that it's like an imaginary deadline that we've set up. So that's the entire idea of setting fake deadlines, or the problem behind it. Now, and this is a system that we can use. So like imagine if the human work week was actually reduced to 4 days instead of 5 days, I guarantee you that human productivity and the amount of economic output that we have will not change a single bit, because human minds will then naturally focus on the most important things at hand. Okay, as time grows, right, as we allocate more time to things, we will naturally create more activity, create more things to do to fill up the time, right? Create more activity and things to do to fill up the time. So really have to give ourselves less time to do something in order to actually be more productive, right? So there's some things that, they're actually 3 months due, but then you realize, you can probably do it a day. So to give yourself 1 day to do it. Okay, it's gonna become way more efficient, and this is how you can increase your efficiency. And then there's other just patterns of thoughts that are just very helpful. One thing is to minimize effort, maximize output, right? So being more efficient. You want to be known for being more efficient with your time and energy, right? This is, by efficiency, like if we look in the NFL, this is what we call yards per attempt, right? If you just look at how many yards the quarterback is throwing, quarterback can throw for a lot of yards. But if he's also using up a lot of attempts, that's not very efficient. That's why yards per attempt, in my opinion, is actually one of the most important and useful indicators of a quarterback's performance, because it really shows how much yards you're gaining on a single attempt. And so it's a very good measure of a quarterback's efficiency. Right, so what I like to think is yards per attempt. Another thing you can think of this is this a difficult task, or is this a difficult task? Right. Again, you can have many different perspectives. Find the perspective that works for you. So in this case of, is this a difficult task or is this an easy task? If this is an easy task, you just think of it as an easy task. And then it won't be challenging. Right? But if you think, I have to do this, then it will naturally grow in complexity and it will become even more challenging. So these are the things I've learned. Hope you had a good time watching, and thank you.